The first thing we're going to review is how to fill a shape with a pattern. So what you need to know is that any shape can be filled with any color or any patterns that are loaded into Illustrator. But first you need to know where they are. So you need to have the fill color active, and you want to make sure you know where your swatches are. So if you can't find them, go to Window, Swatches. Then go over to the menu options and go to Open Swatch Library. And then one of the options is patterns. You can choose any of the pattern libraries and they have several options for you. The Pathfinder. So you can take two of your shapes and combine them together. So here I have drawn two shapes and went to Window, Pathfinder, and used Unite, and now I have one large shape. That comes in handy when you need custom shapes. Now I filled it with a pattern so I can show you how to, that you could use any fill. So the pattern might look a little confusing. So let me show you this in just solid colors. So I have two shapes. As long as they touch and overlap, they can be combined. So here I have two. Now I'm selecting both, going to the Pathfinder, Unite, and now I have one large shape. You can also use the Pathfinder to subtract parts. So if I have two shapes drawn, like I'm doing here, you can select them both and click on Subtract Front or Minus Front from the Pathfinder. This comes in helpful when you're drawing parts of characters. So this character that I have, the reindeer, it needed a part that looked like this. So I drew two ovals and minus the front, and now you can see it matches what I have needed for the character that I was drawing. Another thing is you can cut things in half. So if you needed to, you could cut things in half minus the front. Illustrator has a layers panel just like Photoshop does. So if you had a shape, so here I have a shape, and say I wanted to make a second copy of that shape, select just that shape and go to Edit, Cut, or go to Command X, and it will make that shape disappear, but it's saving it to the clipboard. Then I can go over to the layers, add a new layer, and hit Command V to paste, or go to Edit, Paste, and that shape will appear on the new layer. Now I can take that layer and drag it below the original shape. And so now I have two shapes, but they're on different layers, and I can stack them any way I like so that they're in the order that I prefer. You can see that would be helpful in a character like I'm building over on here, this reindeer. If we look at his chest, you can see that I have two shapes that are stacked and one needs to be on the other layer or above the first layer. Next, we're going to learn about the blob brush. This is different than the paintbrush. So you find the blob brush and you can use the brackets to make it bigger or smaller. And this is meant to add blobs or draw blobs. And if you just keep drawing over something, it will just keep adding to the original shape. Now if I select this, you can see it outlines this with paths. So you can take the anchors and move them, or you could even take the eraser and erase out parts. And so it's kind of a nice tool. Now, if you're drawing a character, maybe you have a reference picture, such as these antlers. What I could do is take the blob brush and I can size it, again using the bracket keys, and I could just draw over what I need. And so again, I can make different sizes, and just as long as I'm adding to the original, it will keep adding to that shape. And so now I have a shape made out of the blob brush. Now you don't want to outline things with this. You want to make sure you're filling in the inside for it to work best. So consider using the blob brush when you're trying to make shapes that need to be a little bit more free-formed and would be harder to make with just your general shapes or the pen tool. Next, we're going to look at a feature called the Draw Inside command. So you have to find this feature at the bottom of your toolbar. If you hover over it, it will say Draw Inside. Now to activate it, you have to select whatever shape you want to draw inside of, and then you click the Draw Inside button, and then you'll see these brackets appear around your shape. Now you have to remember to use the Move tool and click off of this shape to deselect it before you can draw inside of it. Now you're ready to draw inside. So I chose the blob brush, and you can see I can draw outside of this shape, but it will only draw inside of the shape. When you're finished drawing inside of a shape, you have to make sure you go back to normal mode. Now that you're in normal mode, you could use the white arrow, the direct selection tool, and all those little shapes that were drawn inside are still their own shapes. So you notice here I'm colorizing them and doing different things to them, but so they are still their own shapes. They're just inside of the first shape. Now sometimes when you're drawing in Illustrator, you might want to get a reference picture. So here, I'm going to show you that you could go to the internet and Google a picture and bring it into Illustrator. Once you find a picture and you have it somewhere, you could go to File, Place, and then you could find it from wherever it was. So mine's on my desktop, and then hit Place and then click, and you have your reference picture. Now you do have to click Embed at the top, or it will not be there the next time you go to open your file. When you're preparing to work with your reference file, there's a couple things you need to do. So after you embed it, you can go to the opacity and lower the opacity and go to Object Lock Selection. That way it will not move around, and it will be kind of a grayed out image that you can work with on top. In this next section, this is just an example of you can watch me work how I worked with the reference file. So I'm basically drawing on top of this. I'm using the blob brush for his gloves. I'm going to use the pen tool here to make a rough idea of his coat. Now I'm going to go to colorize it, and then I'm going to go to draw inside. And I'm going to add the white detail, which I'll actually add more later on top. I'm going to add his black belt and his white stripe down his coat. Once I have that detail inside, I can go back to drawing normal and then go back to the blob tool, and I can make his white fluff around his arms and the bottom of his coat. And that's just a good way to get started on using your reference picture.